with Daniel Mitelpunkt, who is the director of the Digital Media Lab, and Simon Pocock, who is the Learning Tech and Software Lead of the Interdisciplinary Education Tech Lab. So I have to read that because it's a long title. They're going to present to us some very interesting ideas around asynchronous interactive media, and really exploring with us some of the ways in which the very exciting virtual reality work that's going on in our classrooms in person can be used to support, or what versions of that can be used to support online and blended learning. So I'm really looking forward to them telling us about our latest innovation, and they're going to be getting you to think about the ways in which these things could be used in your teaching practice, because that will inform their work going forward. So plenty of chance for you to influence the work in this area. So yeah, without further ado, I'll hand over.
So first, yes, this is the slides, asynchronous interactive media, and we're going to share a project from the IEDL, which stands for Interdisciplinary EdTech Lab, and the DMLs, which stands for Digital Media Lab. But the project is shared deliberately as a proof of concept. We haven't finished. This is half done because we are really keen to make this conversational and to take things forward and for it to be informed by the conversation with the wider community. So we start here. Take yourself back a year ago, Festival of Learning, and specifically the Digital Media Lab. We were involved with a couple of sessions. One of them was a workshop, and for us, this was sharing the very best of what we can do. It was an R&D project coming to an end. We were sharing 3 different new workflows. It was kind of our, if you like, a kind of platinum premium offering in VR, things that, for example, such as motion capture in virtual reality production for education, realistic digital twins for labs, data visualization using game engine in VR. And it was really difficult to kind of finish a project and present it to the community. And we had some really helpful sort of feedback, and very quickly, within weeks, all of them started becoming student-facing projects. So kind of there was a nice switch over from, okay, we have a proof of concept, it's R&D, but will it be useful with students? So there was traction, and then that was very nice. And I was on the verge of feeling relief that we've delivered something sufficiently successfully. And an unnamed senior manager within our education ecosystem was very complimentary and kind, but then quietly asked me, so how much of that, all that exciting stuff, how much of it can you do in LMS, VLE, the online and blended learning? I think my exact response was, oh. And to be fair to myself, which I might be, there were really good reasons. This is not apples and pears. This is like apples and bananas or whatever, like just very, very, very different stuff. But I understood why the question was asked. I could see how, for the same reason that some of us deliver regularly education using VR with individualized head gear and what have you, that some of the needs will play out in our fully online or blended offering. Now, without getting into too much stats, let's just say that we know that there are certain things that we can give and we are giving within our heterogeneous offering in LMS and VLE, certain things that perhaps not so much. We also know that we have regular and growing VR teaching at Imperial College. I'm going to probably forget to mention all the right groups, but I'm just giving you an example. Don't want to upset anyone. We have regular teaching with it as part of the curriculum within the medical school in VR, and that's untethered using a particular kind of type of headset. We have the Verse project, which is kind of now moved from being a project to being something that's much more kind of embedded in teaching across departments and now the faculty, which is great. And we have multiple other examples. We're now working with chemistry undergrads. So VR as a solution has multiple benefits. This is not what we're here to discuss, but let's just go somewhat on trust that there is a reason why those groups within Imperial College choose to use virtual reality. But it doesn't help me when I'm asked how much of VR can you do on LMS, because the answer is none or was none. So virtual reality teaching at Imperial College tends to be on campus. So for example, if you're talking about a fully online course, a fully online degree, already, that's one good map. It tends to be synchronous. We don't just tell the students at the moment, grab some headset and do whatever. These are part of structured on-campus synchronous teaching. If somebody said, how about you just send all of our students and learners VR headsets, and then you just plug it through the learning management system, that has multiple technical issues with it, but even more so, I mean, the feasibility, for example, when you're talking about different people in different places, sometimes we have an online course, maybe outreach or synchronously, where you're talking about more than, I mean, even just doing it with 20,000 students would be quite expensive and clunky. Just the, I don't know, the FedEx bill would be significant, and there'll be a multitude of challenges. It's a non-starter. So VR is scaled within and is scaling up, but there's a limit to the scale that you can have. And it's not cheap to develop content for VR because it's a very premium sort of environment. You need to have very premium kind of AAA development. And we all, VR has some accessibility issues. Now, most technological sort of EdTech interventions may have some accessibility sort of challenges or just things to be aware of. And VR is definitely that. So just to say, now, you know how sometimes there's a technology which evolves in a way. So there's something that changes that technology. And even though it's just an evolution, it's not something completely new, but the experience feels much expanded. So I can still recall when this happened, when we moved from silent movies to talkies. That was a long while back. And that was an exciting moment because all of a sudden, yes, film was already there, but the ability for people to say stuff on screen was an exciting change. Similarly, this was great. So when television moved from black and white to color, again, you know, you already had television, but I was really excited. I was quite young when that happened, but that was a fantastic change. And another example is this. Some of you may recall this, but you know, we had the internet, but your flatmate was trying to make a phone call, or there will be some beeps, you know, when you were trying to make a phone call. So the change, even though it was all internet, right, but from dial-up to broadband was also a nice sort of evolution of the sector. Now, basically, we work together to add inclusive, seamless, scaled, interactive 3D to asynchronous learning on LMS. The music is optional. So make a point that this is really exciting, despite it. So what is AIM after this preamble? So the project we embarked on is a holistic, actionable framework for including real-time interactive 3D into LMS or VLE. Now, for those of you who are not very close to it, just to explain, it mostly isn't the case. Outside of this project, there's fantastic stuff on VLE and LMS, lots of really good work. Our teams are regularly involved with that, but not interactive 3D so much. We wanted to use existing tech in new ways to deliver value to learners cheaply, flexibly, and efficiently. In other words, we didn't want to start a project that would take years and would be, oh, there's a new LMS to spin out. We wanted to see what we can do quickly, with available tech, without anything really new, just kind of low-hanging fruit, really. Now, presented as proof of concept to Imperial's community, that is you. You are the community. So we can continue developing the framework together with colleagues. Again, you are the colleagues. Now, we piloted an edX, but the point is that it can be deployed across any LMS or VLE effectively, because a lot of this stuff, I'm simplifying, but effectively it's an iframe. You can, it's transferable. It's not an edX project, and very little actually, and Simon can go into some of these, very little actually sits on edX. It was difficult. Why was it difficult? Because once you say there's no individualized or high-end hardware, you have taken fantastic devices that were created exactly to not have all of these other problems. And you're saying we take that out of play. Then we went basically no downloads or apps. When someone is having their experience on LMS or VLE, we don't want them to kind of go, oh, now download that thing. And if you're on a Mac, that might be a problem. And then if you have, if you I don't know, if you're taking your fully online degree over, using a tablet or your phone, that's going to be a problem. We want it to remain within the LMS. That means that we can't do some of the exciting stuff that, let's say, when some people think of gamers, right? Some of them they do stuff that is not on VR, but is incredibly high-end through a very sophisticated software, effectively, that they download. We thought that was irrelevant here. We had significant limitations of the learning management system, ecosystem, and web. So the bottlenecks, I'm trying to overemphasize this. So the bottleneck is significant. We wanted to do it cost effectively so that it's easily scalable, not using some brilliant solution that, once you hit a little bit of traction, all of a sudden becomes, it's not feasible, it's not worth it. And most importantly, we wanted for it to be pedagogically useful. The reason DML, when we started kind of figuring out that we may have something that reached out to the Interdisciplinary EdTech Lab, is because just the fact that we know that we can probably do something doesn't make it a good thing to do. So hence that kind of collaboration. Over to Simon to actually show you the actual details, the actual stuff. Nice. Okay. Right. Hi, I'm Simon. I'm a learning technology and software lead in the Interdisciplinary EdTech Lab. I wanted to say that again to just warm up a little bit. Okay, so this triangle here might look like a pyramid with technically that's reflecting the limitations of 2D. Actually, it's a triangle that you're looking down on from above. They are all equally important. It's not to sort of indicate that technical is the most important thing. As part of the process, we wanted to make sure that learning and teaching and the content and the technical were all equally important in the process of developing 3D activities. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the learning designers in our team did. I'm not a learning designer, so if I say anything that sounds a bit silly, then apologies in advance. But the important thing is that learning designers were actively involved all the way, making sure we hit one of these success indicators here, this pedagogically useful. While also we had members of the DML and myself acting more as a developer, technical artists working on making sure that we hit all these other success indicators in a kind of interdisciplinary team. So so to talk a little bit about the approach that we took. The learning designers, one of our learning designers, Dave, took inspiration from a course where learners were able to, or were learning about batteries, and you might want to really experiment where you put some things in a potato and then you hook it up to a light bulb and you see where that light bulb gets lit. And so we thought, well, it would be great to actually give that experience to the learners and allow them to do that experiment in the LMS. So that's kind of the content that we are trying to thread through here. So you'll see a lot of batteries. And then we have the learning and teaching, the learning designers thinking about the digital pedagogy behind all of it, and yes, technical as well, which I'll probably talk about a fair amount. Okay, so the learning design framework that the designers wanted to look at was Laurela's learning types. In particular, in this project, we hit upon acquisition, investigation, and practice because they fit very nicely into what we were building. You could equally use something like Bloom's taxonomy or another pedagogical framework, but this happened to suit quite well. And there are things like production, collaboration, discussion, which, while we didn't necessarily tackle in this initial kind of phase of the project, there's definitely room to explore those going forward. So please don't ignore those as well. So I'm going to talk you through a lot of slides that look like this, but are all subtly different. So I'm going to try to explain all the different parts here. Do I have a little laser pointer? Kind of, yeah. Can you see that? Okay, yeah. All right. So we have 4 different aims, we're calling them. So aims are the categorization that we're using is to represent the level of complexity that went into the development of these aims, rather than how useful they are or anything like that. We certainly want to emphasize that an aim 1 is not necessarily worse in some way than an aim 4. It's just that there's different levels of development complexity into it. And we're using these little kind of chili peppers to also highlight that. So these are empty outlines, and you'll see that they gradually get filled up as we go up the aim number. And then we're talking about here the kind of skills that are required to create these things and embed them into a platform in LMS. In this case, we did it in edX, but you could do it in Blackboard or another LMS that might be chosen in a future major college-wide project. See you soon. So here we have a nice 3D representation of a battery. So in this case, this could be a battery that you've just bought on there's lots of places to buy 3D model basically, and then you embed it into your LMS using an iframe. So this is hosted on Sketchfab, which is an existing website that you could just go and make an account on right now and embed, and you can start playing around with a 3D model. This battery is, because we're threading through this battery, I'll show you something that perhaps the value of the 3D-ness of it in a second. And down here, we are talking about the learning type. So here, you can think of a learner investigating this thing and studying it for their own benefit by looking at it in different ways and thinking about it like that. And the key thing to highlight here is also that the categorization, this number and what learning type there is are also unrelated. Those are important things to consider, but this is what the learning designers thought this particular thing that we made reflected, but the context of what else is going on in the LMS, if you practice it with something or you've got a discussion like a Padlet or something like that afterwards, that's obviously going to change the learning type that you might be kind of putting together in the process. Okay, so I'll move on to the next example. Here you have a big 3D molecule that you might be used to as a student seeing 2D as like just a picture if you're only on LMS. If you are in a lecture theatre, your lecturer might show you an actual 3D model that they were kind of handling, and then you would get a better sense of the angles, things like that. Whereas it might be harder to understand this representation if you're a completely asynchronous learner. So having a kind of opportunity to play around with it, look at it, and get a better sense of the angles yourself provides that extra value. This is another one where we're saying, you didn't have to do any 3D modeling, you just embedded it as an iframe into the LMS. So it's zero development complexity, still investigating this object. So you can see this kind of little hand moving around. That's the learner clicking and dragging around to manipulate and see this thing from different angles. Okay, so we've got another example here that has a slightly higher development complexity. So we're saying this one has one chili pepper, it's an aim 2. And the reason that is because this requires some 3D modeling from the DML. I believe Penn puts together, put lots of nice little sort of hotspots you can click on and investigate and read the different labels, see from different angles. So all the different moving cameras, this view type selection adds a little bit of extra interaction. It's fundamentally sort of the same learning type that you're getting to see in a little bit more detail. But you might have to commission a model from the DML, and that would be an extra chili pepper to this kind of, put it in the context of the AIM categorization that we're doing here. Okay, here's another example. So another battery thing, but this time it's a circuit, and you get the electrons flowing around the circuit. Similarly designed. We don't have any kind of like moving and panning around, but you still can. In this case, again, in Sketchfab, embedded in frame, just a 3D model that I believe Penn put together. Okay, so another example, so something a little bit different is a lab that you might go and get here. This is an Agilent lab that actually exists at White City. I don't know what Agilent means, but oh, okay, it's the company. Okay, cool. But basically, this is an opportunity for a learner to learn about what is actually in a lab asynchronously. Potentially, if they are a blended learner, it could be before they go to the actual space and see it in the real world, therefore giving them kind of an opportunity to not be overwhelmed by space, which could be really useful for people with certain neurodiversity needs. So that's another way that this could be kind of thought of as inclusive. What maybe I haven't said the word inclusive specifically related to here is because we're broadening the audience of people who can access this stuff by putting it online. It can be, you can access it from anywhere in the world because of the way we're hosting it. That's kind of, bringing this VR, but actually just 3D in this case, not VR, to a much wider scale. Okay, and here we've sort of identified acquisition as well. I guess reading the descriptions of each of the different things and learning a bit like that from the navigating around the lab. And then we have another example here. Here's a nice 3D cell with some moving parts. This animation is part of why it's got this extra chili pepper. And you might also label this as well, so investigate this as well. And we have a kind of exploding 3D battery where now you're clicking on different parts and it moves over to the side. This is subtly different from the previous one in this case because there's extra interaction where something making it move around. Someone has had to go and write some JavaScript. I think this was Thomas actually from the DML. Wrote some JavaScript connecting with the Sketchfab API to make this stuff work. So it gets an extra chili pepper. You need to know a little bit about JavaScript to make something like this work. But again, it's a 3D model that has a little bit of interactivity, not loads, but allows a student to investigate an object or some system. They could potentially be pressing a button that changed how it behaved, or this kind of exploding model where they can investigate different parts. And then we have aim4, which has the 3 chili peppers. So we made use here of an entirely different engine. This is using Play Canvas, which is basically a 3D game engine that can live on the web. It uses JavaScript and embedded this kind of canvas thing in and of its own. Here, what we've done is we've created a lab where the students can actually go through, interact with the different parts. So here, they're picking up the fruit and vegetables that they're going to use in their experiment, their battery experiment. They're going to move over to the experiment area and experiments together. They've got their multimeter and their different cables. And now when they click on a different item, it will give a measurement over there in the corner. Apple made 0.65 volts. And actually, this is getting put into the edX, a table in edX as well. So you can kind of interface between these two different things. It's embedded as an iframe, but it's a Play Canvas thing that's been built. And so we've chosen this example of kind of an experiment, and it's a relatively simple experiment. You probably wouldn't be doing this experiment, I assume, at university level, but you could certainly go for something with much more complex underlying knowledge requirements or learning requirements. This is kind of a demonstration to try to tie everything together and give you a sense of the kind of thing that you could theoretically make. So again, this is really bringing a lot of the kind of interactivity, this experience that you might be able to do in VR on campus, doing something that could be difficult and impossible, all these kind of, I'll talk about DICE in a second, but instead you're doing it online, on your own, in your own time, asynchronously. And here, the learning types that have been identified include also practice. So you could be doing an experiment, having kind of learned about how to do one in advance. Okay, so I don't think I necessarily summarize this in great detail. Again, I've taken my time explaining everything, but as you can see, we've got the 4 different aim types that we were trying to talk about with the increasing complexity, where 0 chili peppers, the kind of thing that many people could just do without the support of HTML. Sketchfab using iframes and a 3D model that you find online and you really like that might be helpful for your teaching and learning context. And then the next 2 levels up also use Sketchfab, but you might have some 3D modeling requirements. Maybe you can't find a 3D model that does everything that you want, or you need some animations or you need some tweaks to an existing 3D model for aim2. And then for aim3, if you want to add a little bit of extra complexity of interaction, would be using JavaScript, that kind of support. aim4 is the kind of highest development complexity, where you use Play Canvas to have a very interactive experience. It's very customizable. We've shown you an experiment, but there are lots of different things you can do there. The sky's the limit, really. I say, maybe not the sky, but pretty high. There's obviously a lot of limitations associated with the web. The technical artists in the DML have done a lot of work in making sure that this stuff is small file sizes, looks really good, but doesn't necessarily require loads of processing, because you need to be able to do it on your mobile phone. You need to be able to do it on your old laptop that you have lying around. We're not asking students to buy a high-end machine or anything like that to be able to run it. And the other thing to note, again, while we've written aim 1, 2, 3, 4, and it feels like there's maybe a hierarchy here, the thing that you wouldn't necessarily need an aim 4 to deliver a really high quality learning experience or type of material content. I think it's all kind of exactly the what you're looking for, what you're looking to do. Okay, so I've done a little screen recording of the course that we put together in edX to try to demonstrate some of this stuff and tie some of this stuff together. So I'm quite quickly skimming through it. Obviously, a learner would take their time a little bit more, but I'm trying to just see everything that you can see. Here I am looking at one of these batteries in the page embedded, and then there could be some text explaining some stuff. Here Dave's nicely put that this was inspired by a Reach Out CPD course. You work your way through, you see your 3D models, maybe with various descriptions or information along the way. Here's the electron one. And actually something that I haven't highlighted, but is present and isn't necessarily a clear, we haven't necessarily identified a clear learning reason to do this, but these things can be seen in AR if you have a certain, a lot of mobile phones can do this in AR, so you would scan that QR code and you could kind of see it in the room or the desk or something like that. But maybe more of a gimmick or a fun thing than necessarily something that has a lot of pedagogical intention behind it. And here I am going through the lab again, just to try to, show you how it looks if you're doing it just as you work your way through the course in your LMS. So again, this was done in edX, but it could be in anything really, or many LMSs, I believe. Just wait until we've gone through and taken a look at these so that you can see that the table here is now being filled in. So that's a nice fun kind of interfacing between the two with a little bit of JavaScript code. And then you move on and maybe you answer some questions about the work that you just did. Okay, cool. All right, so we also wanted to kind of have an opportunity for discussion. I think we're really interested in what people see in this. If there's some anything that you think, oh yeah, I'd really love to be able to embed something like that in a course that I have. So we have, well, we'd like to ask you to maybe have a chat with your next thing or two, and then there's this Menti link that you can follow using your phones and fill in maybe what you or any thoughts you have about what might be useful for you in this context.
How many questions? I guess it's more just like the amount of time it takes someone to download the image and you can take it free. Like 3D modeling, no time. So it's really funny how yeah, so it's quite like crazy. That's what I'm saying. And maybe that was a like patchy 1980s. Perception. Yeah, you blend with
You're just like, oh, no, just do that, but it's like,
can't explain it because I'm not. Science. So come to the Imperial. And then saying how you react to the emotion. I synthesize all that. I could argue with that's the key question. Just the answer is the institutional flowing around that trial.
Different, and it's like you look at different point things like
That's all changed. So now if you put this new code into your Menti, sorry, we haven't got a QR code now, I'm afraid. But if you put that code in, it will enable you to share your summary of your conversation. And then Simon and Daniel will reflect back some of those things. I'm going to give you about a minute to do that. Thank you. Now we still think about the time. Are we all?
We're working on this.
Hey, could you just make the numbers bigger?
Yeah.
The old folks in the back.
Is that big enough to mail?
Much better, thank
Yeah.
I was going to say this together. It's a really interesting. Like, I think the teams they are where you.
I want to do that.
Like to go outside and do it. It's almost like. Like I don't know where the right sound is. But anyway, and I must have. But it's I don't know what it is. You run through randomly. It's a light pop. Yeah. Yes. No, there's such geographic outdoor space.
Right. Okay, thank you, everyone. That's a lot of responses. That's really good. Yeah, some great stuff here as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. Something like an anatomy lab really clear. You can't do that. Let's say space for students to explore the clinical context. Yeah, opportunity for people to make mistakes, something like that. Away from eyes of lecturers might be a nice way for people to explore this stuff in a safe way before they come to assessment. Digital twins. Yeah. Okay. Another kind of thing to think about, if a space is being used a lot or users are being used a lot, a way for people to get more access to that space. I think is a really nice idea. These are things that you would definitely think about using VR for as well. And I think that's kind of the obvious through thread for us as well, is that there's a lot of things that you might want to use VR for, things that are commonly used by a lot of people, and therefore it's difficult to get access to. Maybe this kind of rare in the Valence and Dice framework, or by depending on which one you choose to use framework. I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, that's great. Outreach to introduce lab equipment to students with schools and not food. Yeah, that's lovely as well. Similar kind of opportunity to see spaces asynchronously. Great looking at rocks. I like that. That's kind of bad. Okay. Susan, to see things instead of read. Yeah, brilliant. Sorry if I skip any of your stuff. There's so many responses. I don't think I can send too long on everything, but yeah. This is great. Maybe we can share this after the fact as well, so people can have a look. Absolutely, we'll definitely be spend a long time going through the, because this is a very new thing. So there'll be all the use cases new and unclear and exciting to us. Maybe something for us to kind of take us onward in terms of next step. I think the whole sort of scarce resource thing about digital twins. That's already a big thing with VR, and for understandable reasons. But what we're saying is even the VR sessions we have on campus, that in itself becomes a scarce resource because it's a big thing. You need to carve out space for them. It's synchronous. People need to be there. You need to have dozens of VR headsets. You need to design for VR. So, and in some, in terms of accessibility or just confidence, it might be that I don't want even my VR session, which is not the physical lab, to all of a sudden overwhelm me if I haven't figured out some of the component parts. So you can almost imagine in a blended course, that's my kind of reading of this, that you could basically maybe take tiny little components or bits and kind of get your head around certain things, and then maybe in a digital lab you can really do a lot of stuff. It's not the physical lab, but you get further skills, further competence, and then you get into the even more scarce results, which is the physical lab. Having basically had almost like a build-up of skills and the cost as well. So you kind of get to the actual physical lab or the clinical space, the MRI, or which having had lots of cheaper, smaller, more limited opportunities to get your head around certain things. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, I think there's an interesting point here about manipulation of complex data, this kind of thing where you would need the expertise of an academic or a subject matter expert, as well as 3D visualization experts in the DML. It would have to be a very collaborative project, definitely. Okay, that's great. Lots of really interesting things to look at there. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, cool. Not a lot of time there, and it would be nice to have kind of a Q&A session after this. I'm going to nip through the remaining slides. So we were trying to think about what the value is for the learners, trying to think about this in a more critical lens. We believe that learners get experiential value out of this by exploring an environment or playing with a thing, a 3D thing. It's not necessarily tactile, but it's perhaps a bit more tactile than just an image or something like that. Learners have more interactivity, which can provide competency and skills-based learning for asynchronous learners. And then, 3D media, which is great. Small things, large things, invisible things, these things that are potentially difficult or impossible to see or interact with in the real world. You get an opportunity to do that instead in your VLE or LMS. Keep going. I probably won't go into much detail here. I alluded to it already, but there's a kind of conversation to be had about what makes sense to do with an aim as opposed to just making it a video or something else, or even some notes that would be just as valuable. And you are thinking about that in the context of fairness and size framework. So this is a framework for when you might want to use VR when it's dangerous, impossible, counterproductive, expensive. So there's some examples: dangerous, like a dangerous machine that you might want to interact with; impossible, like sending students on a field trip to the moon, or something like that. I think that the barrier to entry is lower for AIM. I would make that claim because there are a lot. It's a lot less intense, or a lot less resource and time intensive to develop something for AIM as opposed to a VR learning experience. So I don't think you have to be quite as strict about what you are allowing people to do, I suppose. And also, there's I think we've seen already there's clear value to just seeing something in 3D and being as opposed to a flat image or in a video, so you get to experience it yourself. And that doesn't necessarily fit nicely into this DICE framework. So I think it's DICE perhaps, but with more other reasons that you might want to do this with. Do AIM. Okay, and lots of different things here about why there's times when you might want to not do AIM. But I think it'd be interesting to hear everyone's thoughts as well. Okay, I'm going to just move on because I think we'll talk also about, okay, so we've got some more stuff to do. We're going to continue developing. Something that we have not talked about is all of the backend or under the hood stuff and how it works and how it works better for some browsers than others. And, there's a little bit of points associated there. So there's lots of development to be done still, as we've already sort of shown. This is a good concept. There's lots more to do, and then we'd like to pilot it. We'd like to get feedback. We'd like to have lessons learned, and then share internally and externally, perhaps as well. Okay, great. And now something to play around with. So here's an aim2 example. I really hope this QR code works. So if you would like to take a look at this, it tends to work better in Chrome. So if you are having problems accessing this 3D model, I think of a solar system. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a 3D model of a solar system, I believe. And if you're having trouble accessing it on your mobile phone, you might want to use Chrome instead. But this is not embedded in a platform. Instead, it's just a way for you to kind of play around with this 3D model and see what that interaction might actually be like for a learner. We didn't share it through edX, but we've got lots of other stuff on channel to get everyone signed up for it. But yeah, just an opportunity for you to have a play around.
I think the key point that the model is not the aim. Aim is the whole point is you want it to be part of the flow on whichever LMS, which we've showed as a video because we're not enrolling in courses today.
Yeah, okay, so maybe a minute to have a look at that, and then perhaps in fact we'll just roll straight into Q&As and it should be, but I suspect it's one of the tiny. Yes, as you can see, the sun is quite large as well. Probably not realistic, also scale. Okay. Again, we can see as a chance to take a picture of that. So I just wanted to obviously let you know everyone who's been involved in the project as well. Also people from the DML and also the Imperial. It's been a really good collaborative experience. A couple of people who aren't on here who I would like to thank as well, Chloe and Dustin from the IATL who helped with some edX bits as well. All right, and then we'll move into the discussion. So
Thank you very much to Daniel and Simon for such an interesting presentation of their work and getting us to think about its relevance for our context. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask, which would help them kind of make more sense of how this could be used, or questions about the chili pepper or the learning types or any of those things that help us kind of categorise this? Yeah, Phil.
So it's not actually a question. It's one of those. This isn't a question.
Oh, one of those.
So, somebody asked whether there could be a central team like ImpVis for these kinds of resources, and I don't think I'm giving away any state secrets when I say that ImpVis are getting involved and collaborating in this space. So I guess watch this space. I just wanted to say that that is happening.
Yeah, that's a really helpful connection. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really like the example there as well of getting students involved and thinking about it. And I guess that's something that you have the possibility to do, that actually maybe students could be working at the level 1 and 2 of the chili peppers and be partners and 3. Okay.
Yeah, to build on that question, is any of this like staff only software, or would students be just as capable of working in this space in terms of building? In terms of building things as students?
I think in principle, students could work on any of this software. Play Canvas is the one kind of caveat. We have some accounts and that cost money to buy. It would be quite expensive to give access to a large number of students. And I don't know, that's a future thing that might be possible, but certainly, you know, the modeling is done in Blender, which is a free software. Sketchfab, anyone can make an account. Yeah, JavaScript as well. Anyone can write JavaScript without having to pay any money or anything like that. So yeah, it's definitely something that students could get involved with and
I would add, we used models that we created because we could and wanted to, but the whole point of A1 is, in theory, let's say that you're teaching something and there's a, as long as there aren't any IP issues, but you found a model, you go, that's what I need, I just want to show them that, I want to embed that as an iframe. In theory, there's no modeling. You really just need, it's just an embedding of an existing thing. Obviously, you need to be lucky and you need to be compliant with all sorts of Creative Commons or what have you, but it's not inherent to the framework that you need to develop anything.
Any more questions? We've got time for a couple more.
You thought about how, sorry, have you thought about how we could share like models that people in Imperial have created, like ease of will it be?
Not yet, but I think it's a really good question. And actually, yeah, I think there'd be a lot of value in that. If I know that the email already has a big database of models that models that others work. Yeah, it'd be a nice thing to do for sure.
And is there an easy way for us to access that models?
Currently not, because we're hiding it, but it's not. Honest question, rather than it's technically very easy to do. We've already seen in VR development that the barrier to developing quality stuff is sort of changing as you have more and more of these objects that you can just reuse in different. So, for example, when we're doing new labs, that a lot of the stuff, the lights, the benches, the basin, the fire extinguisher, we're reusing. So the same logic is not applied, which is why that's a very good question, and there's no reason why not.
Questions? Yeah, Phil? Sorry.
I was just wondering how easy it is to use kind of off-the-shelf assets that you might get from somewhere like the Unity store or the Unreal store, either from a technical point of view or from a kind of legal point of view. Is that something that one could use to speed up the development process?
Yeah, I think that's built into the idea of the A1. Obviously, any particular model that you looked at might have its own licensing that you'd have to consider, but these things have, allow them to use it in a wide variety of contexts. So you have to take a look at the licensing of that specific model, and believe that actually putting it onto Sketchfab is pretty quite a straightforward process. So at least, and then also using it in Play Canvas, that's a bit harder, but I think is quite doable as well. So yes, definitely an important part of speeding up the process and also making it easier for anyone to support.
I think just a caveat, but Thomas White, please, if I'm caveating wrongly, please kind of indicate. I think it's a lot easier to move the assets, as in, let's say, the 3D model from one platform to another. The interactions, let's say you've developed something really nifty on Unreal or Unity, it's not a lift and shift. It's going to be a bit, you may need to, you got your head around what you want to do, but you're going to have to kind of do a lot of it from scratch.
Different program. So yeah, but you'd be translating from C# to JavaScript or something like that. Yeah.
I think we'll go to a close there. So thank you, Daniel and Simon, very much for taking. Thank you to you as the audience for your ideas shared through Mentimeter, which I know is what Simon and Daniel are hoping for, and also for those really interesting questions. Thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Martin Kingsbury, who's going to pull some ideas from today together.
So thank you. A couple of observations from today. The first one, it's good to see so many people here, and it's good and reassuring that you all do what all students always do, which is sit at the back and leave the front empty, unless it's absolutely full. But it's nice because it means it's real and you're doing what most people do. So the festival this year is about sustainable success in teaching, learning and assessment. And we're talking about sustainability in a sort of big use of the word. how do we reimagine our teaching, our learning and our assessment in a way that we don't only just teach sustainability and teach our students to think in a sustainable way, but do it so that it is sustainable in a survival sense. This is one of those places which we are so full of ideas and overworking, overachieving staff and students, that if we keep racing ahead and pushing, there's a real danger that we're not going to survive what we create for ourselves. So this festival is about creating some space to do all of this great stuff in. And when Hugh kicked us off this morning, he talked about our really ambitious strategy. And I made a few notes, which I'm going to refer to because my memory's getting really poor. So is my eyesight, so this might have to come up really close. But actually what he was saying was that in that project, in that very ambitious project, he wanted Imperial strategy to nurture talent from across the world. So it's a big stage we're working, right? All talent from all across the world, and to celebrate and harness diversity. So this isn't just about widening participation, it's about celebrating and harnessing diversity. In other words, changing it from a problem into a benefit, working together on this big stage to tackle what he called the big problems of humanity, the big challenges. That was a really sort of big stage introduction, and it was followed up by our keynote panel. And I think all of us will remember Wayne running in and inviting us to join him in his race around the world. And he had lots of takers, me included. And he introduced us to this idea about seeing EDI as this ACT, this awareness, consideration, and then to translate that EDI into our daily behaviour so that it becomes an active process for all of us. And I think this idea of translating that into an active process that we all routinely do is what's going to be necessary to make this this thing that Hugh was talking about, which is celebrating and harnessing diversity. Monica followed on from Wayne and discussed the idea of what she called the messy beauty of our complexity and of our diversity. And I think that was a really good visual image. We are quite diverse, and some of our research has shown that our students recognise that diversity when they come here and apply. And it is really beautiful. The diversity is beautiful, but how do we get that potential? How do we harness that potential from that beautiful diversity? And how do we examine what Monica invites us to do, which is examine that cultural baggage that we all take with us in order to make the most of the potential of that diversity? How do we use that examination of our own, not just our cultural baggage, but all of our experience, all of our strengths, all of our weaknesses, all of our challenges? How do we examine those and share them so that we can work together towards that greater internationalization that will be required to harness the diversity? And then in the shorter sessions, obviously, as with all conferences, none of us can get to everything, and there's always more that you'd like to see than you're able. But I went to see a really interesting talk by Steph and the GP team about their project Amplifying Diverse Lived Experience in Medicine. And one of the things that came across from that was this idea that what was at the heart of it was this joint thing of being trusting and trustworthy, because those things provided that safe space for an authentic sharing of experience, and that's what powered the learning for that. And in fact, that links to what Daniel and Simon have just told us about. They told us about a real example. It wasn't fully finished, it wasn't polished. And I think that's what's best about this festival. It is a safe space where we can share ideas and share challenges and share successes in a way that is both trusting and trustworthy. Because when we do that, we have the benefit of all of your ideas, all of your input. You've asked great questions today. You've shared on Mentimeter. And in all the conversations I overheard at break times and at lunchtime, that's what generates this potential for celebrating and utilising the diversity of thought and ideas of our beautiful and messy community. So thanks very much for all of the presenters today, all of the people that have contributed, all of the people that have enabled this to happen. So thanks very much to that. The other thing that I was told to tell you is to signpost for tomorrow. So with our sustainable success theme, today's mostly been about teaching. Tomorrow is focused more on learning, and we've got a keynote which is coming from TUM, and Claudia Poise is going to talk to us about how they've, in the process of integrating their lifelong learning agenda in TUM. So they are, I guess, slightly ahead of where we are in our new strategy with that. So I'm hoping that will be a really interesting and valuable lesson for us to learn. So with that, thanks very much for surviving to the end. Thanks so much for all of your really valuable contributions. And I hope to see you all tomorrow, same time.